One of the most important reasons to move the camera is that it adds a lot to the emotion of a shot. As we looked at in the directing course, pushing in with the camera draws the audience into a shot and creates more engagement. This can signify a mental awakening like we looked at in Back to the Future, or represent an incoming threat like we saw in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Or it could just pull us in like we saw in The Shining. Now, what if this shot in particular were just static and the camera didn't move? What story would that tell? To me, that would feel strictly observational, like the visual equivalent of saying, presented without comment. Basically just, here's something Danny did in the course of his day. But by pushing in with the camera, Kubrick is telling the audience that something is happening, that this is not normal, and that we should care about it. The framing of this shot is also interesting to me. Why are we so far away from the action? By putting us, the audience, in the next room, Kubrick gives us the sense that we're seeing a private moment, that we're seeing the beginning of a metamorphosis in its earliest stages, that we're seeing a side of little Danny that maybe even his parents don't know about. Now, what about those stickers that are on the door? Why are those there? It seems to me that those might be more about the camera move than they are about the character development. If we mask out the outer door, the movement is so subtle that it's almost imperceptible. By using a lens that has a slightly wide angle, it exaggerates the size of the objects next to the camera. The open door with a noticeable texture, like these stickers, gives us subtle cues that we're pushing in. But because they're on the edge of the frame, because Danny is doing some interesting stuff in the center of the frame, we focus on Danny. The stuff on the edge of the frame becomes like a subliminal cue that we're inching in closer. Conversely, pulling back the camera can create a sense of loneliness and isolation, as seen in this shot after Cordelia was left in the wilderness by Tayani. This also gives the audience a chance to feel what Tayani feels as she leaves Cordelia. As we talked about earlier in this chapter, handheld shots can add a dose of intensity to a scene. This is often used for fight scenes or for scary parts in horror movies, but it can also be used when people are in love and feeling passionate. It's also important that you are mindful about the weight of the camera rig and how balanced that is. When the camera is truly handheld, as it was in the Blair Witch Project, it can get nauseating for the audience. Remember that the camera represents the eyes of the audience, so it's usually best to rig the camera so that it moves a little more slowly and evenly than it would if it were simply held in the hands of the operator. Again, for more information on the emotional impact of camera moves, consult the previous course on directing. It's important to remember that as the cinematographer, your job is to help the director tell a visual story. So get acquainted with the language of visual storytelling and the way that camera movement affects the emotions of the audience.